Red, white, purple, district lines and colors are shifting all over Texas, but some of this started way before the redistricting conversation even began. And one area in particular really riled things up, especially among Democrats, and that was, of course, the Rio Grande Valley, an area people were not necessarily expecting to change. But amid those shifting tides, the person that I have on the show today won her election during that time. So we're going to be talking about the Rio Grande Valley, the border, water, and so much more. It's time to spill some sweet tea. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sweet Tea series. My name is Ariana Guajardo. Thank you guys for joining me today. Today, I have Representative Janie Lopez from House District 37 joining me today. That is, of course, in the Rio Grande Valley. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Ariana. Great to be with you.
I'm so excited that you're here, and I finally have someone else from the Rio Grande Valley here to chat with me. But we're from, I guess, a little bit away from each other on opposite sides of the valley, but I feel like a lot of it's all still the RGV at the end of the day.
McAllen down south.
Yeah. So
it's all the RGV.
Let's kick things off with an easy question. So what is something that you've missed, like food-wise, being in Austin that you can't get here, that you have to go back to the Valley for?
Oh, my gosh. Well, we can get some of it here, but it's not the same thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so definitely the Mexican food. There's a place, when I get a chance to go to the Brownsville area, they have the Mexican taquitos, and some of the reps have been down to the border wall. And
Do you all take them there every time?
I took them there to eat taquitos. I told them, this is the closest you get to real Mexican tacos. You know, it's like, but I'm not going to take you into Mexico, but
and
these are great.
I like tacos here in Austin. They're just not the same thing.
Yeah, they're
it's
not.
A different, I call it a different genre of food.
Yeah.
Mine is the pan dulce. Even going into East Austin, it does not taste the same as getting and to let everyone else know, that's like the Mexican pastries, and they have little shops there. They're just not the same
empanadas here. With, you know, the pastry that has the pineapple inside, right?
Yes.
And good. We have a bakery in San Benito that uses an old brick oven.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. The bread there is amazing.
Sounds like some good stuff comes out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time my husband and I go visit my family, we always bring back like a box of stuff, and I'll share it with everyone in the office.
Oh, yes.
You
Ornelas.
have to.
You got to go to Ornelas.
Oh, and
in San Benito.
Okay. That's the one that your favorite one over there? The brick oven one? Oh,
yes.
Sounds so good.
Yes.
So you were raised in the Rio Grande Valley. I was as well, but you were there during the time when a lot of these political shifts started to happen. So can you explain to people how what that political landscape was like before, and then what happened around, was it the 2022 election whenever you won? Is that correct?
Yes. So
what happened?
So it's really interesting because you took me back to when everybody was kind of shy about being Republican or being conservative. And if you just use social media as an example, there was always attacks on the Republican Party. And people really didn't comment too much. I mean, Republicans got attacked and so forth. And I started commenting, and I started seeing that once I started commenting on how I support the Republican Party or their views, people started commenting more on Facebook. Now, I don't think I started that trend, but I think people were kind of scared, you know, or they were afraid to say that they had these conservative values. And little by little, now you see Trump and speaking up and talking about how important taking care of our cities is by border security and protecting letting law enforcement, not necessarily protecting law enforcement, but letting law enforcement do their job, you know, and not attacking law enforcement because they're doing their job. And so you start seeing a shift there where it's like, hey, this is important. You know, the valley is important. Border security is important. I used to tell my consultants, 80% of the people here go to some kind of church. You know, it used to be that probably the Catholic Church was the biggest back maybe in the 80s or 90s. Mm-hmm. And now there's a shift to more non-denominational Presbyterian or other types of Christian religions. And so I was like, you could see a church in every corner. And so what does that mean? That means our values in the valley are founded in our Christian beliefs, as believers of Jesus Christ, you know? So that's why a lot of people are against abortion. And especially when you're hearing on the Democrat side that it's okay to have an abortion at 9 months, you know? That's
Or
horrible.
the shout your abortion kind of stuff.
Oh, and it is okay. I've had 5 abortions or 6 abortions, and it's a cool thing to do. It's like, no, it's not the cool thing to do.
And so do you think that those kind of values and people realizing that the Democratic Party didn't align with their beliefs, is that what started that shift? Or was it some of the messaging that President Trump had that people were just ready to hear?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, that we know what we stand for, we know what we believe in, and it just made it easier when we were hearing our leader talk about our values that we aligned with, you know. And so I think it has to do with both. I can honestly say, like, because I would hear how bold Trump is in standing up for what he believed in, I feel that made me a stronger person too, that we did have to speak up, that we didn't have to hide in the closet because we were conservative.
So do you think that that the issue about border security in particular was one that really excited people? Because I think for so long the left had this narrative that people who are Hispanic, or like you, who's a daughter of an immigrant, that they don't want border security. And I think that the Valley has kind of shown them that they're wrong. Do you think that that was an important issue that started changing what people started, how they voted?
Right. You know, my parents, like you said, they came from Mexico legally, and now they're naturalized citizens, and I'm so proud of them. And when I was out campaigning, and I was in the I started with the primary, knocking on Republican doors, and it was easy, right? Talking to Republicans, because we could align very well. When I was going into more of the Democrat area, it was a little concerning to me at first. I was like, I wasn't sure what I was going to expect. And because I'm here, I'm coming to their house, trying to flip them, trying to get them to see why I would be the best candidate for them. And knocking on doors there, people started talking about border security. They said, look at all these people coming in. They're getting free housing, free credit cards. And, you know, they were hearing about all these things that the immigrants were getting as they were coming into our country. And people were upset about that. They talked about how hard they work, how hard they have to work to pay for their bills, to pay for the family needs. And they didn't like that people were getting, you know, free things. And that's one thing my parents told me too. They growing up, my parents said, we're not going to live off the government. We're not going to go ask for food stamps. And some people need it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing. But just kind of want you to see what the mentality was, what I was running into, what people were telling me. And it made me connect to what my parents would say when I was growing up, you know, that they are hardworking people. That's what it is. The people in the Valley are hardworking people, and they have value in that. That's what makes them, you know, Hispanics, hardworking people. And they didn't want people to just come and get everything free.
Right. And I think that a lot of the shifts that have happened is even the Democrats in the Valley, like you were saying, they have conservative values. Like, they're into entrepreneurialism. You're not going to find people who are most of them are not socialists, and sadly, that's a lot of where the Democratic Party has moved. And so to me, it seems like a lot of people in the Valley just didn't move with that shift whenever the Democrats have continued to become more progressive.
Oh, yes. I remember when, you know, back when Senator Lucio would run, and he was a very moderate Democrat. And a lot of people say the JFK era, right, of when the Democrats loved JFK because he was very moderate, more on the conservative side as a Democrat. And when I was getting to know people would tell me, you know, I voted for Senator Lucio because of his pro-life.
Oh, wow.
That was one of the reasons. And so I would tell them, well, as a Republican, I'm all that and a bag of chips, you know. It's like, you're going to align with everything with me. You know, you supported the pro-life, but I'm pro-life plus all this other stuff. Border security, pro-jobs, you know, pro-economic development. And the Valley cares about the real issues. They want better jobs. They want their kids to go to school, to go to college, to get that opportunity that maybe they didn't have because they had to work. You think back in the day, the Hispanic families would have large families, 10 kids, 12 kids. You still hear about how large these families were. My family was 7 kids. But a lot of these families back in the 60s or 50s or whatever, they were going to work in the agriculture fields. The valley was a lot of agriculture. And that's why they would have large families, because the more kids you had, the more labor help you're going to have, right? And so maybe they didn't have the opportunity that we do now. And so they want their kids to finish school, to go to college, to get a good paying job. And that's what we want. That's what the Republican Party stands for. Opportunity, small businesses, attracting good companies that are going to pay well. And when you got the leftist agenda talking about men dressing up in women's clothes or putting a man in a girl's restroom or having men compete against women in sports, like, that's not what the people care about. That's not what the Valley wants.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up some of the importance of agriculture to a lot of the people who are there, because agriculture, especially the winter vegetables and, of course, citrus, is one of the biggest things. And whenever people think about the Rio Grande Valley from other parts of Texas, I think the border is first what comes to mind. But not a lot of people know about the water crisis and how that's affecting some of the crops in the valley. So what's happening there, and what are some of the proposed solutions to the water crisis?
Right. Like I said, it's a big farming area, ranching and farming, and just the way we have floods with just 3 inches of rain, we also have drought. And when we do have drought, it hurts our crops. The farmers can't grow their crops. And that happened to us within the last couple of years. And so the sugar cane had to close down because of that. So we don't have sugar cane across Texas anymore. I know that Commissioner Sid Miller was working on something to try to bring them back again. So I know he's working on something like that. But the issue is we don't have enough water. So it rains. We collect water in the Falcon Reservoir and Amistad. That comes downriver to us. That's released to the farmers, to the agriculture. However, if we don't have enough water in the reservoirs, which we didn't recently, we had the reservoir was only at 18%.
Yeah.
And if you're only at 18%, and I remember one of my city mayors said, Janie, our water reservoir is at 25%. What does that mean? We're having to figure out how to cut down on the usage of water because our homes are not going to have water. And if our homes are priority, then that means that the agriculture is second, and they're not going to get their water to farm. And so with a lack of water came the issue of farmers are having to shut down because they can't grow. And so working with the IBWC and, I know that Dr. Hined was trying to advocate for the valley and the water needs and so forth, but it was very difficult in the Biden administration because the farmers felt like nobody was listening to them. And that's a federal issue, so we couldn't fix that as a state. And so the conversations between myself and the state agencies was we can't rely on the federal government just like we couldn't rely on them for border security. What are we going to do to address this water issue? What can we do? And I'm thankful now to Trump that he was working and pressuring Mexico to give us the water that they need to give us from the Rio Grande. Mexico was holding the water that they owe us based on the treaty that we have.
Yeah. The 1944 water treaty.
Yes.
And we've upheld our end of the bargain, giving them the water that they're owed from the Rio Grande Valley, but they're not sending the right amount back.
Exactly. They weren't giving us our water. And they had 5 years, I think, to give us the water, or
Right.
3 years or 5 years. Anyways, so we as a state then, with Senator Perry and Cody Harris now, came up with a water plan. So let's put more funding into water infrastructure. And so, okay, let's build up new plants. I know in the Valley we can do desal water, but we have other kinds of water, not just desal, and desal is more expensive. Anyway, so in these conversations, and we included the Texas Farm Bureau, some of my local irrigation districts, and water suppliers and stuff. And we were like, we found out, well, it's not necessarily only that we need to build up more water plants. We also need to fix the old infrastructure because it's deteriorating. And if you think of a water leak, you think little drips. Well, no. You're talking about a water line busting that is like a fire hydrant type of water being released. Okay. And so when you have one of those water lines and you lose millions of gallons of water because it busted overnight and you didn't find out about it, for a few hours, then you have an issue. Not only do you have a lack of water, but also the water that you do have, you lose 60% of that.
And our infrastructure for the water in Texas is pretty old now. I think compared to the rest of the nation, we have like the 5th oldest. It's something like that. So we're definitely a little bit behind on our repair needs for our water.
Hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
You're talking about the metal pipes that are deteriorating. That's what's going on. And so we did put a lot more funding into both things. Because originally, I believe the plan was only new infrastructure, but then they ended up putting more into building up the old infrastructure and building new infrastructure as well, which we received quite a bit of funding already for the Valley. I know that the Rio Grande Water Supply Company got a few $1 million this session, and they got some last session too. Then Brownsville PUB also got some funding as well, about $40 million in my area. And so I'm very thankful to our leadership, Speaker Burrows and the Senate and the governor for all their assistance and paying attention to the needs that we did have in the Valley. And so overall, my first session, we increased funding to the Valley, whether it was water or drainage. Because of the flooding, we increased it. Just the first session, we got an additional 40% compared to the previous session before I was in here. And so haven't gotten the new stats yet for this time around, but I am very, very appreciative to how the leadership has been supportive of us.
So while we're on the subject of legislation, you're on one of the most important committees that everyone has to at some point work through, which is the Calendars Committee. So will you explain what the Calendars Committee is and how you've played a role on the Calendars Committee?
Yeah. Well, the legislative process is lengthy, and I know for most people, they don't understand, right? And so I try to be very open about how this works for people. And so you got a bill idea, it gets assigned to a committee, and if it goes through the committee, it gets voted out. Then it comes to calendars, and when it comes to calendars, we vote as a committee there to decide if that bill gets out of calendars and then comes to the House floor. So all 150 reps will vote on that bill. And so calendars is really the last step before it comes to the House. So your bill could make it through, or it could die there, And so that was really exciting, especially when we got the big, beautiful bill on the big, beautiful map, And unfortunately, the Democrats didn't want to show up, and we had a break of quorum for about 18 days or so. And we ended up voting for that bill in calendars and got it out to the House floor. But unfortunately, we didn't have a quorum to vote for it on the House floor. As people know, you have to have 100 state reps out of 150, and we're only 88 Republicans, so we needed at least 12 Democrats to be there to be able to vote on as a quorum, and they were refusing to show up. They were refusing to take a stand. And it's okay if you don't agree with us. This was more of a partisan bill on the map. But show up to your job. People elected you to do a job. If you, Ariana, or I don't show up to, a job, say I'm a teacher, and I don't show up to my job, what's going to happen? They're going to fire me, right? Mm-hmm. And that made a lot of my constituents mad. It didn't matter if they were Democrats. The Democrats, your moderate Democrats in the Valley, were letting me know this was upsetting to them. And they said, that doesn't represent us. They need to go back to the Capitol and do their job.
And a lot of the border Democrats showed up, right?
Yes. In Hidalgo County. Mm-hmm. The Hidalgo County Democrats did show up. You had Sergio Munoz, Armando, Terry Canales, and Oscar Longoria. They were there. So there were a couple that were missing. Brownsville, one from Brownsville and one from Hidalgo County. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I forgot who it was that was saying that they were there, even if they didn't support the bill, because that gave them an opportunity to actually speak about it and do something.
Exactly. Yes. And I read newspapers too, and heard some of their videos and so forth. And that's what they said. They said, we don't agree with it. Mm-hmm. We think it's horrible. But we're here to keep an eye on the Republicans,
Yeah.
But they were there, right? They were representing their constituents. That's what they got elected for. They didn't run away from the issue, and they faced it. They voted no. They spoke up against it, and they voted.
Now let's talk about one other, an area where it seems like Democrats and Republicans it appears sometimes that they have a little bit of a difference. Mm-hmm. So I think that liberals in general like to believe that they have some kind of monopoly on compassion. And so even whenever they're speaking about things politically, a lot of times they're bringing it back to something that's a little bit more emotion-based versus a lot of Republicans have this habit of sticking with numbers and facts. So do you think that there's an actual divide there, or are those two a little bit closer than people might think?
Yeah, I'm a true believer, and I tell this to people all the time. I'm a true believer of what the Bible says. And the Bible says, speak truth, and the wise will know, right? People will know the truth. And the Valley, the people are very, very smart. They'll see through lies as long as you put the facts out.
Right.
It's like I told Governor Abbott. I had a conversation about school choice with him. And I said, Governor, they're doing a real good job of putting out misinformation out there. What are we doing to put out the truth? Mm-hmm. You need to tell them the truth about how vouchers really work. Well, ESAs, but they called them vouchers. Anyways, and so I believe that the people in the Valley are seeing past that rhetoric and those lies, of, oh, there's nothing to see here. We don't have a problem on the border. But yet there was 500 people coming in one night through the borders. And what message does that send to law enforcement? That we don't believe you? That we don't trust you?
Right, because if you're seeing it and then someone's saying that's not actually happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's not happening, and literally I was in meetings a few times where the Democrats from the Valley were telling the law enforcement, like, oh, this is all rhetoric. That's what we're here for. So we can talk about this and the rhetoric. And I was like, I know what you all go through. I've been to the border. I've gone on rides with law enforcement. I believe you. Mm-hmm. I know what you're going through. So what I want from you is to know, what do you need? How can we help as a state? Do you need more funding for equipment? Do you need more funding to hire more law enforcement? And in talking to my locals, I learned they get shot at. They get stabbed. The cartels had better equipment than them. And that was deeply concerning. That wasn't rhetoric.
And I'm glad that the state of Texas did, before the Trump administration came in, actually stood up and was like, well, this should be a federal issue, but they're not taking care of it, so Texas is going to have to step in. But since the Trump administration came in, I think labeling the cartels as a foreign terrorist organization was a really important step towards being able to solve some of the other issues that we have on the border.
Right. Yes. I mean, think about it. And I used to work as a counselor in the immigrant shelter with the young kids. And so we had to assess them. And the federal government would train us on what are some red flags to look for. And we knew a lot of the people coming in from El Salvador were part of the MS-13s or, this terrorist organizations. And I just think about it, like we had some Russians come in, we had people from China come in, or Africa, other countries, and you think about it, like, okay, there's this percentage of people that are getting caught, and then those that are not getting caught. How many of those were terrorists? How many were sent over here because their government wants to hurt us? And so it was deeply concerning. And you got 10 million people coming in. I was at a conference one time, I think it was an NCSL national conference where state legislators get together. And a lady from New York, one of the senators, was saying, it's horrible. Your governor, he's sending all these people to us over here. We got 40,000 people coming in.
And
I looked
like,
at her, and
I think we've been feeling.
Yeah. I looked at her, try not to be ugly, right? I looked at her and I said, I understand you. We got 10 million people coming in through Texas,
Yeah, it's and people didn't understand it until they saw what it actually looked like. And you got to then work with some of the children in those centers. Did you, I guess, get to see with your own eyes some of the horrors and the abuse of what they experienced?
Yeah. As a counselor, one of my jobs was to assess the kids as they were coming in. And so definitely I heard the stories of abuse and rape and just their innocence being taken away, Here their parents were thinking, I'm sending them to another country so they can have a better life. But they don't realize what they went through on the journey, I remember one time talking to the employees there, because you had case workers, and they followed the kids everywhere. So when the kids would come in, they would have them bathe and got new clothes and gave them food and so forth. Anyways, this one child didn't want to come out of the restroom when he arrived. He was in there for about 30 minutes already, and they called me to go try to help. And I knocked on the door and trying to be as calm as I can with him so he can see that I'm here to help, And I said it in Spanish, but I said, are you okay? I'm here to help. Come outside so we can talk, And the staff had told me he doesn't talk. We've been trying to tell him stuff. He doesn't listen to us. He doesn't understand us. And he's just locked up in the restroom. The kid comes out. I take him to my office, 10-year-old little boy. And I know how to assess, right? So I talked to him and I said, you must be very scared. And he's just staring at me. And I said, you must be very scared. And I started doing the questionnaire on the assessment, and it turns out that little boy was raped.
Wow.
He was raped. That's why he couldn't talk. He was traumatized. So when I got to that part of the assessment, he just started crying and crying and crying. He was raped. 10-year-old little boy. It's heartbreaking. So yes, I heard it firsthand. And that's why I know that it wasn't rhetoric.
So in the last few months since Trump's taken office, have we seen, how much of a decrease have we seen in occurrences like that?
Oh, tremendous decrease, tremendous. our law enforcement was overwhelmed during the Biden administration, where they were outnumbered. That was the biggest thing they would tell me. We're outnumbered. If you have 5 agents out at the border and you got 1,000 people coming in, we're outnumbered. Mm-hmm. That's why we need a wall, because it could deter them to come in through specific locations, so they're not all coming at us, and like this, at least we can process them.
Right.
And so this is law enforcement telling me how having that wall helped. And so now you're not getting those large numbers for sure,
mm-hmm.
And so there's times where I call certain people that I know just to see how they're doing, how things are going for them. And things are pretty calm right now,
Yeah, I have a friend who works in customs in Eagle Pass,
Mm-hmm.
so a little bit farther up, but she was saying that she's noticed a huge difference in people trying to come in, and it's been a lot easier for them to process recently.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I want to wrap things up with is you are obviously in an area where, like you said, when you started speaking to Democrats and telling them about you were not always speaking to people who are going to agree with you on everything. Mm-mm. So how do you start having those conversations with people you might disagree with? Like, how do you get someone to start listening and trying to figure out where you might agree so you can work together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't want to give tips to opposition.
Well, let's say that there's a young woman who's in it, let's say a college space. She's surrounded by people who don't agree with her constantly. How do you start having those conversations and bringing people over to your side a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it comes very easily because I'm a mental health provider. So I'm pretty good at listening to people, right? So basically, just listening to see what their views are. One, being the way I word things, I'm respectful of their views. I'm not going to tell them they're stupid or whatever, even if I disagree with them.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can do is share what I believe in and what the party represents, and how that's good for them, without getting into an argument with them of whether I believe them or not or whatever, So there's a way to approach the issues, right? And then it's up to them if they agree or not, right? Being respectful of that. We might flip them, we might not. And one thing that people, it's important for people to understand is you're not just going to flip a person just like that. I mean, I have friends that support me because they know me and they align with my values and so forth. But they might have their cousin that's a commissioner and he's a Democrat. Mm-hmm. So they're going to go vote in the primary to make sure that their cousin or their friend or their neighbor wins. But then in the general election, they're ready to vote for me and their friend or their cousin. Mm-hmm. And they'll tell me, like, Janie, I'm not going to go vote for you in the primary, but you're going to get my vote in the general, because I got to go vote for my cousin. and that's what's a little concerning for me in having a cutoff for people to vote in the primaries, because we're still trying to flip people, and then if we have a cutoff, then that's going to take away time that we can still flip people to vote in the primary. And so I know that there is a big move for that, but I think that in areas like mine, that's not going to be helpful, Well,
I'm glad how you started with what it was how you approach people, which is that you listen to them. Mm-hmm. And so I think that first of all establishes trust of, they're not just trying to preach at me. They actually want to hear what I have to say too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing more about the Rio Grande Valley, some of the situations there, and of course your experience in the mental health care field and how that's overlapped. And for everyone else, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.